Hello, and welcome to the ZOIA Librarian version 2.0 update. This is a big update. It includes a majorly requested feature, the patch editor, which is finally available for ZOIA. So we'll go through that process on how that works, as well as a number of bug fixes, quality of life feature updates, and general what does this update entail to the application. So first, we'll go through QOL stuff. We updated the module index to reflect the most recent version on ZOIA 5.3, which had some changes to the granular module, having some more options. That was added. I went through and I pulled the latest module index from Empress, going through all the blocks and CPU stuff to make sure it was ready for the editor. That's all been updated. Documentation is updated across the board for both the manual as well as the build tools, unit tests, and general deployment for this application. So that's all there. I made a pretty big effort to improve the testing and make sure everything was ready to go. So excited about that. There's also a experimental flat pack provided for Linux distributions that you can build yourself if you're curious. I haven't personally tested it because I don't really use Linux, but if you're a Linux user and want to try that, please feel free to reach out to me and we'll get that working. Yeah, as far as future plans, most of what I'm thinking, and I'll discuss this in the video, is optimizations and sort of tweaks to the editor to make it even easier to use. So that will be sort of the focus going forward, as well as ongoing OS supports for the major Mac and Windows updates that come out, and bug fixes. So yeah, let's talk about some stuff. For the first thing I want to talk about before we get into the editor, I added it's sort of just a little thing. Any image that gets supplied from the patch will be displayed in the upper right corner. Sometimes folks will put in like the control page or maybe a routing view or something like that. It's just a useful visual to have. So that's in there. There is also a pretty big change to the way drag and drop works. So this applies to both the SD and the folders view. The same exact logic applies. So let's say we want to move some patches around. I want to move 50 and 51, and I want to put it between 46 and 47. Drag it here. So it'll plop those there. It'll also do gaps. So like if you want to move 49 and 51 between 46 and 47, it'll do that. And then it'll sort of move everything appropriately so it fills in those gaps and makes it just sort of more intuitive for moving patches around. And this replaces the old swap behavior. So before, if you would move 36 over to 4, it would just swap their positions. Now it actually inserts that old 36 over to slot 4 and then moves everything else down. So it just sort of makes it a little easier, more intuitive for how you would move patches. Also on the SD tab, when you import as a version history, it'll do a couple of things. So let's import this one. So first thing it's going to do is going to create this version history called main3, which is basically a copy of all those patches independent of anything else. So this is like a copy of your set list or your main ZOIA folder, whatever you need it to be. It will also create a folder in the back end. So this folder basically exists as a quick export process, right? So you can import from your unit, and then let's say you want to add patches to it. You add some patches. You say, okay, that looks good. Then let me export. Now I have a new folder ready to go on my SD card to load back into ZOIA. So it's a quick way to sort of import, export patches. That made sense. So I did that. Let's see. In terms of fixes, one fix specifically on the folder tab, if there was like a duplicated patch, so like soft focus 52 and 5, if I would delete 52, it would actually delete, it used to delete slot 5 because that was the first index of that patch, but now it will actually delete the correct one. That was fixed. There was a bug with importing patches. It would like not, when the app would reload, it would delete that patch. That was fixed. Let's see. There was a bug in Zebra patches showing having 128 pages. That was fixed. There was some tab switching UI stuff that was fixed. If you have a version history, such as here, and you deleted a patch and you were only left with one, what would happen is now it'll bring you automatically back to the full table page rather than leaving you in the version history with only one version. So that was fixed. The menu import threads are working now, so that's using a separate thread outside of the apps, outside of the main threads. That was fixed. The expander has better handling for feedback loops, so everything will be displayed. We'll talk about the expander a little bit in the editor process. Yeah, and then one of the major things that I worked on to get the editor working was the patch encoding and decoding process, because we needed to be able to write, the details of the patch to a binary to export. So that process was cleaned up, and I did a lot of testing around that to make sure it was working correctly. So that's in here. I think that pretty much does it for quality of life stuff and general updates. So with that said, let us talk about the main feature, the patch editor. So in local storage, you'll see two new buttons. There's new patch, there's edit patch. We'll start with the new patch. When you click new patch, you're greeted with a new window called the patch builder. It's sort of laid out in 3/4 different views. The first view is our available modules list. This is similar to what you find on ZOIA, each category, and then a list of modules. In the middle is the current modules in the patch, and on the right are the options, connections, and parameters for that module in the list. So what I've done is I've initialized every new patch to always have an audio input and output with their connections disabled, so you don't have to break that connection when you're adding stuff in between, but it's there. In the future, I can see users creating their own sort of recipes and pre-built things that they want to add in. But for now, we have a simple sort of, you build it up connection by connection, similar to how you would do it on the unit. So let's look at an example. Let's do a simple example. Let's add in a delay in between these two. So we're going to click on delay with mod. We're going to insert in the list. So now we have 3 modules. We could take a look at what it looks like currently. We have 3 modules. All right, so they're unconnected. Let's go through and just change some of their options. So let's change some colors. We're going to keep the stereo inputs and outputs. Let's switch this to stereo with a BBD. I'll bump up the mix. You'll notice here on the parameters, these are all 0 to 1 indexed. This is not ideal considering there are some different ranges and units that are used in the unit on ZOIA, but it's not a consistent method for how they work. That would require a bit more effort to get that down pat, so it always displayed in the expected, milliseconds or hertz or whatever the unit was for that particular parameter. So 0 to 1 makes the most sense for now. And then let's see on the output, let's make it red with the gain control. All right, so how does that look like now? So we can see our colors got updated. We now have stereo for the delay, and now we have a gain block for the output. Cool. So let's now wire this up. We want to take the audio inputs to the delay inputs. So we have our first connection. We have our audio input output block going to the delay input left at 100%. Let's do the same thing for output right into delay input right. And then we'll go from delay to output. There we go. All right, so now if we check the routing, we see here we have a stereo path. We have our input to delay to audio output. Cool, that looks good to me. So I'm going to export this patch. It's going to prompt for a name. We're going to do a simple delay. And what this is going to do, it's going to automatically create a new entry in your local list. And we see our patch here. We double check the routing. One thing I'll note is, one thing that you didn't see, and you don't have to do, is you don't have to specify where the blocks go in on the unit, right? So this is automatically calculated based on the space available on a page, or if it has to overflow to another page, it will move things. But you don't have to think about that sort of page by page. You can think of it more of a holistic view, top-down view of everything and how it all connects. So that's sort of the idea behind this. So now that we have our simple delay, let's edit the patch. So editing looks similar, but it's pre-populated with your existing changes. Let's say we want to add some modulation to this. Let's edit LFO, and we want to connect this green sine wave LFO pretty fast. We want to connect it to our delay block. Let's connect it to our delay time with a 25% strength. We see here now we have LFO routed into delay time. We can export that patch. When you export an edited patch, you're given two options. You can either overwrite or create a new version. So let's create a new version. So what this will do is you'll have now a second patch. You'll see this first one has no LFO, and the second one, well, the top one has the LFO. It orders them in the versioning that you're saving it as. Right, so we can see our LFO is connected, and we can even export this. We can export this straight to our SD card. So there's our simple delay, and then we can load it onto your unit. A couple notes. So there's no guarantee that a patch will work when it comes to CPU because of two things. One, the CPU estimates here are not exact. They're based on averages in the module index that Empress provided. It doesn't reflect the actual real world case of the CPU that's being utilized by that module. This especially comes into play with the dynamically modulated things like a tone control or multi-filter. If you modulate those with CV or even like an envelope follower or whatever, they will spike the CPU because of just how they're built. So that doesn't get reflected. But there are some guardrails. So if I add like 4 ghost verbs, because I really like ghost verbs, and try to export, it's going to tell me that based on the CPU amounts that are in here, again, the averages, this would have 110%, which is way above the hardware limit. You can export it and you could try it yourself, but it's probably not going to work. So if I take away one of these, there is a second sort of a warning. So the first warning is it's above 105. The second warning is it's close. So anywhere from 100 to 105 is that close range. It'll give you a slightly different message, but the same idea applies. This patch may not work as you're expecting it to because of CPU limits and the disconnect between the average values versus what's actually happening on your unit. So use at your own caution. It's not going to break anything, but it just might not. You'll get like the audio clipping, the digital clipping that doesn't sound great. The patch will still export, it just might not sound good in that case. So yeah, that's the editor. Super proud to have that available. Feel free to play around with it, mess things up, try to break it, and then report back. I could certainly see things like recipes, things like pre-made, user-defined defaults, that kind of thing, all being edited in future versions. But for now, we have an editor that creates new patches, edits patches, and successfully goes to and from the ZOIA unit with no issues from what I can tell. So yeah, that's 2.0. Again, feel free to leave any feature requests or bug reports in the repo or any comments you have on the video. And happy ZOIA-ing. Okay, bye.